In this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe and leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Great new day to all my self-care friends and family. Welcome back to the Room2Breathe podcast. I am your host, Life Coach 614, and I am so thankful and grateful that you have made space to be here with us today. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I need for everyone to do me a quick favor. If you're feeling the vibes, go ahead and show some love. Tap the screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need for everyone to share this out with someone who could use a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here or you haven't already done so, go ahead, hit that follow button. Subscribe to our channel so that way you're always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also invite you to check out our digital home at theselfcareclub.org, where you will find everything you need from affirmative apparel to motivational merch, as well as a ton of free resources to help nourish your growth and remind you that you are supported every step of the way. Just know that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today I encourage you to give yourself permission to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly, for you. And remember, if anything in today's episode hits home, be sure to drop those green hearts in the chat. That is our community's way of saying I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. Family, listen, today's conversation might hit a little different. Not because it's loud, not because it's dramatic, but because it's the kind of struggle that I think people carry quietly. You know, the kind that people hide behind productivity, behind I'm good, right? Behind showing up, behind responsibilities, behind survival. And of course, it's Wednesday, so I got a word of the week for y'all. Thank you guys for the follow. I appreciate you so much. So let me go ahead and pin this in the chat for us so we can get into this conversation, y'all, because I think this is going to be a really good one for us. Can somebody pin that word for me? So our word for this week is Anhedonia. 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 All right, guys. Anhedonia. Now, the word itself, Elevated Awakenings, Monique, welcome in. The word itself comes from the Greek on, which means without, and donia, which means pleasure. So literally the word is without pleasure. And let me tell y'all something. This is a full transparency moment because the first time I learned about this word, I finally had language for something that I had experienced personally, right? Because back in, late 2019, I went through a season where I genuinely just didn't recognize myself anymore. And what is wild is that most people around me didn't even notice because I was still functioning, still showing up, still taking care of my responsibilities, still smiling when it was necessary, still being the strong one. But internally, I felt emotionally disconnected from my own life. Thank you, MJ. Welcome in, Lady Blue. Shantiana, I see you. Thank you so much for being here. And again, you guys, I was showing up every day. Welcome back, Z. And I don't know, like I said, I just felt so disconnected. Like things that normally brought me joy didn't. Music didn't hit the same. Rest didn't feel restful. Conversations drained me, right? I was exhausted in a way that sleep could not fix. And honestly, that season scared me because I remember sitting with myself wondering what happened to me. Not like in a dramatic way, not in like a public breakdown kind of way, but quietly. Like, I know that I'm here physically, but emotionally, I feel so far away from myself. And I think the hardest part about emotional numbness is that it confuses you because you keep trying to force yourself to feel normal again. You keep saying, maybe I need a vacation. Maybe I'm just stressed. Maybe I need sleep. Maybe I'm being ungrateful. But deep down, you know that something deeper is, it's deeper than just being tired, right? It's like your spirit has been carrying too much for too long. And family, believe it or not, that painful season is actually where the Self-Care Club and the Room to Breathe, project was born. Not from me having life all figured out, not from me feeling my strongest, not from me being healed already. It was born from survival. It was born from me realizing that I cannot keep living disconnected from myself, that I cannot keep pouring from an empty place, that I cannot keep teaching everybody else how to breathe while secretly holding my own breath emotionally. And so that season forced me to slow down and ask myself questions that I had been avoiding. Questions like, what actually brings me peace? Who am I outside of survival mode? What does self-care look like beyond social media quotes and bubble baths? What parts of myself have I been abandoning, trying to, be everything for everybody else? And if I'm honest, Room to Breathe was never just a brand, right? The Self-Care Club was never just a brand. It was a lifeline, like a permission slip. Honestly, a desperate prayer that slowly turned into purpose. Because when you've experienced emotional numbness, when you've gone through a season where you don't even recognize yourself anymore, you stop chasing performative healing and you start craving real connections, real peace, real softness, real honesty, real rest. And I think that's why this conversation matters so much to me today, because there are people listening right now who are not lazy. They're not unmotivated. They're not negative. They're just emotionally exhausted, spiritually depleted, mentally overwhelmed, and quietly disconnected from themselves. Some of y'all have mastered functioning while literally feeling numb. And because you're still producing, still parenting, still working, still answering texts, nobody realizes how deeply you're struggling to actually feel something again. So today, we're not just talking about depression in a way that people usually discuss it. We're talking about the emotional numbness, right? That high functioning pain, the grief of losing connection with yourself, the difference between surviving and actually living. Because survival will keep your body moving, but it will slowly starve your spirit if you never pause long enough to reconnect with yourself. And listen, some of us have been surviving for so long that joy itself starts to feel unfamiliar now. So let's talk about it, right? That I'm here, but I'm not really here kind of feeling. I think that one of the hardest parts about emotional numbness is that it doesn't always announce itself loudly, right? Sometimes that thing slips in the door quietly. Cardi, welcome in, sunshine. Right? That little thing be sneaking in the door. I'm talking about depression, not Cardi. We love Cardi, okay? Depression, Cardi, 2 points. But listen, you don't even realize it at first, right? You just notice that little things are changing. You stop laughing as hard, right? You stop looking forward to things. You stop responding with excitement. You stop feeling emotionally connected to moments that should matter to you. And because life keeps moving, you keep moving too. And Brooks, it's at 40. And you keep moving. You just keep going. Monique says, I feel that now. Stay tuned, sis. I got you. Right? Because that's the dangerous part. That's the part that nobody talks about. Because see, people think that if you're depressed, then that it means you automatically stop functioning. But truth be told, some of the most emotionally disconnected people are still highly productive. They're still clocking in, still taking care of their kids, still showing up for family, still creating content. Thank you so much, Tiffany. They're still answering those emails and still pouring into everybody else. Meanwhile, internally, they feel completely detached from their own life. And that disconnect is hard to explain when you're the person experiencing it. Because how do you tell somebody, I know that I should be happy, but I don't feel anything? Because that guilt alone will eat people alive, especially when from the outside, they may look fine, right? You got the job, the family, the opportunities, the platform, the blessings that you've always prayed for, and still you feel emotionally flat. See, I could talk about it because this is my life. This is my story, y'all. And I know the shame that came with that, right? Because again, that makes people feel ashamed. Because now you're not only struggling, you're judging yourself for struggling. You start questioning your gratitude, questioning your faith, questioning your mindset, questioning whether you're broken somehow. But emotional numbness is real. And sometimes numbness isn't the absence of emotion, it's emotional overload, right? Your mind and your body are basically saying, I cannot process one more thing right now. I can't handle one more thing. See, survival mode does not always look chaotic. Sometimes survival mode looks calm, too calm, right? Like you stopped reacting because your emotional system is just exhausted. And a lot of people, reach that point after years of carrying too much without real support. I'm talking about trauma, caretaking, people pleasing, financial stress, relationship disappointments, grief, burnout, that constant pressure to be strong. And so eventually your nervous system gets tired of holding on to all of that. And instead of collapsing dramatically, some people just go emotionally quiet, right? That's why statements like, I'm just tired, I don't know what's wrong with me, I feel off lately, I just don't feel excited anymore, or I just don't recognize myself, right? That's why those statements matter more than people realize. Those are not always casual statements. Sometimes those are cries for help wrapped in socially acceptable language. And honestly, I think that high functioning people suffer in silence longer because everybody assumes they're okay. Nobody checks on the strong friend deeply. People check on the visibly broken person, right? But the strong one, the dependable one, the one that everybody calls resilient, people just assume that they got it handled. Meanwhile, the person is sitting alone trying to remember the last time they genuinely felt connected to their own joy. And, let's talk about how isolating that feels. Because when you're emotionally numb, people start misunderstanding you. They think that suddenly you're distant, negative, dry, right? Uninterested, ungrateful, moody. When really you're just emotionally depleted. And there is a difference. Sometimes your soul is so tired that even pleasure feels like work. Even rest feels like effort. And see, this is why conversations like this matter. Because too many people are silently suffering while still being praised for how well they function. But functioning is not the same as feeling alive. Just because somebody is, surviving doesn't mean that they're okay. And I really, need us to normalize checking on people beyond how's work, How's business? How's the family? Right? We have to do better. Instead, we need to be asking people, how's your spirit? How are you really doing emotionally? When was the last time you genuinely felt joy? Because, some people have not felt emotionally present in their own lives for a very long time, right? And nobody even noticed because they never stopped producing. That person kept going, so you assume they were okay. But high functioning pain is still pain. Elevated Awakening Mars, welcome in. And let's sit with this idea of being the strong one. Can you guys type strong one in the chat? Or the strong one? Because society loves strong people. But rarely does it ask what strength is costing them. And that part right there, that's the part where a lot of people quietly disappear inside themselves. Right? See, people celebrate your resilience while completely overlooking your exhaustion. They compliment how much you handle, how dependable you are, how calm you stay under pressure, how everybody can count on you, right? They talk about that all the time. Meanwhile, you're internally thinking, I honestly don't know how much longer I can keep carrying all of this. But because you carry it well, right, people assume that it's light. And see, that's the curse of being high functioning, right? That's the curse of high functioning pain. You become so skilled at surviving that your suffering becomes invisible. And honestly, sometimes you even stop recognizing how bad it's gotten. Because survival becomes your personality. You stop asking yourself, how do I feel? And you start asking yourself, what needs to get done? You stop checking in emotionally and you only monitor your performance. Right? Bills paid, kids fed, work completed, messages answered, responsibilities handled. Cool, I'm winning. Right? Okay, cool, I must be fine. Meanwhile, your inner world is falling apart quietly. Exactly, Melody, you become survival. And what makes this worse is that many high functioning people were conditioned early to ignore themselves emotionally. A lot of strong people were the child who had to grow up too fast. Heather Denise, welcome in, beautiful. Yes. Cardi says, business booming, bills paid, but feeling bland inside. Absolutely. Because again, many of us, I can say that too, being the strong one, looking back as a child, yeah, I grew up too quick. Right? And so when I say like you grew up too fast, I'm talking about the ones who were taught, don't cry too long, don't burden people, handle it yourself, keep going, be mature, be responsible, be useful. So now as adults, we don't know how to survive pressure. Or in fact, we do know how to survive pressure, but we don't know how to rest safely. And see, that's why some people literally feel uncomfortable slowing down. Because when you stop moving, you finally hear yourself. And listen, a lot of people have been avoiding themselves for years, avoiding grief, avoiding loneliness, avoiding disappointment and anger, and how emotionally neglected that they feel, avoiding how disconnected they've become from joy. So instead, they stay busy, right? Because busy becomes distraction. Busy becomes that coping mechanism. Busy becomes your identity. And let me say something that might sting a little bit. Some people are not addicted to productivity. They're addicted to avoiding themselves. And that's a real thing, because it was me. Right? Because if you never stop moving, you never have to fully confront how empty or overwhelmed or emotionally exhausted you actually feel. And the world starts to reward that behavior. People praise overworking, praise burnout. They praise self-sacrifice and grinding, right? We live in this hustle culture. Do better, be more. They praise you being constantly available. But nobody talks enough about the emotional damage that comes from living in this constant output mode, especially for women, especially for Black women. A lot of us were raised to believe that strength was survival. Be strong, handle it, push through it, take care of everybody else. Don't fall apart. Don't let them see you weak. And while resilience is a beautiful thing, constant emotional suppression is not healing. You cannot endlessly abandon yourself and expect to still feel connected to your life. At some point, your mind and your body will start protesting. And that's when you start hearing people say things like, I don't even care anymore. I'm exhausted all the time. I feel emotionally flat. I don't feel excited about anything. I'm just going through the motions. So when you hear that, I want you guys to understand that those are warning signs. And because high functioning people are still productive, they often delay getting the support that they need. Again, it was me. In 2019, I didn't, consciously say, oh, I want to go to therapy and I want to feel better. No, I got set down. Okay. I thought, well, since I'm still handling my responsibilities, that I'm okay. I'll be okay. I'm fine. I'm over exaggerating. I thought that other people had it worse. I thought I'm not falling apart. And every single time I said one of those comments out loud, it got worse. When I said other people had it worse, something got worse for me. When I said I'm not falling apart, baby, I fell apart. Right? But welcome in. I fell apart. But pain does not have to become catastrophic before it deserves care. I want to say that again because I need for you guys to hear that. Don't make the same mistake that I did. Pain does not have to become catastrophic before it deserves care. You do not have to completely, break down before you're allowed to acknowledge that you're struggling. And honestly, some people are one more disappointment away from collapsing emotionally because they've been overextending themselves for so long without replenishment. See, that's why self-care is not a luxury, right? It is maintenance for your humanity. Rest, boundaries, honest conversations, therapy, right? Silence, creative expression, grief processing, spiritual grounding, moments where you're not required to perform strength for anybody. That is self-care. Because high functioning pain is still pain. Just because somebody carries it gracefully doesn't mean that it isn't heavy. Now, this next part that I want to talk about, this is where I think that a lot of people quietly start grieving themselves. Because there's something deeply unsettling about waking up one day and realizing the thing that used to make you feel alive doesn't reach you anymore. And I don't think that people talk about this enough and talk about how heartbreaking that feels, especially when you remember who you used to be, right? That version of you that laughed easier, created more freely, had ideas, had excitement, had curiosity, had emotional presence. And then one day you look up and realize that everything has been muted. That's scary because emotional numbness doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it just feels empty, like life lost a little bit of its color. Your favorite music becomes background noise. Your favorite food feels bland. You stop watching the things that you love. You stop creating, stop dreaming, stop engaging with life emotionally. Not because you want to, but because internally you just feel disconnected from pleasure itself. And that can create a specific kind of loneliness that people don't always understand. Because now you're not only missing joy, but you're missing you. That's why so many people say, I don't recognize myself lately. What they're really saying is, I miss feeling connected to my own spirit. And honestly, sometimes emotional numbness makes people feel guilty because they start withdrawing from other people too. Right? You stop answering texts. You stop calling people back. Stop wanting to go out. Stop wanting to celebrate things. Stop wanting to be on. And, people around you, they may personalize it. We always hear that, right? You've changed. You're acting weird now. You're being distant. You don't seem happy for me. You don't ever want to do anything. Meanwhile, you're internally trying to explain something that you barely understand yourself. Welcome in, Tasha Lee. Thank you for sharing. And how do you explain it? Right? Because it's not that I don't care. I just don't feel emotionally present. Coach Shishi, welcome back. And let's talk about how exhausting it is pretending to feel things that you can't fully access. Smiling because you're supposed to. Acting excited because people expect you to be. Showing up emotionally for others while internally detached from yourself. That performance is draining, especially for people who are, naturally nurturing, supportive, and emotionally available. Because now even connection starts to feel heavy. And what some people don't realize is that sometimes emotional numbness is the result of carrying too much emotional pain without enough recovery. Your system gets overwhelmed. I mean, think about it. All the things that we experience. Evita, welcome in. Heartbreak, disappointment, loss, trauma, stress, burnout, constant responsibility, repeated survival cycles. I mean, we go through all of that. And eventually your mind and your body start protecting you by dulling emotional intensity altogether. Not just pain, but pleasure too. And that's why Anhedonia can feel so confusing, right? You said that right when I said the word. Good timing. That's why Anhedonia can feel so confusing, because you're not always sad. Sometimes you just feel emotionally unavailable to your own life. Like your body is physically present. You're there physically, but your spirit checked out for a while. And that realization hurts, especially when you start realizing how long you've been disconnected, right? Some people have, not genuinely rested for years, not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. Some people don't even know what they enjoy anymore outside of productivity and obligation. You said 1.5 years. I get it. That's why when somebody asks you, what do you do for fun? A lot of adults freeze. Because they're like, fun, right? Because somewhere along the way, survival consumed their identity. What do you mean fun? I don't have time for fun. I got to be everything for everybody all the time. I don't have time for fun. When joy starts feeling unfamiliar, that does not mean that you're incapable of happiness. It may just simply mean that your emotional system has been overloaded for too long without enough restoration. And that matters. And I think that part of healing is allowing yourself to mourn the version of you that got lost in survival mode. Not to stay stuck there, not to become hopeless, but to just simply acknowledge that I have been carrying a lot. Put it in the chat. I have been carrying a lot. I have been disconnected. I have not been okay for a while. I mean, sometimes that's just simply the first step, acknowledging it. I've been doing the most. Because that is really important, right? They say the first step is admitting that you have a problem. For some of us, it's just simply, I have been carrying a lot. I have been disconnected. I own that. I have not been okay for a while. Because you cannot reconnect with yourself if you keep pretending that you never lost connection in the first place. You know, and maybe that's the deeper conversation here. Maybe healing is not becoming someone completely new, right? Maybe healing is slowly finding your way back to yourself again. Back to your laughter, back to your softness, back to your creativity, back to your emotional presence and your peace, back to your humanity. Because family, you deserve more than a life that feels like obligation. You deserve moments that actually reach your soul again. And you know, let's talk honestly about survival mode. Green hearts in the chat if you can admit that you have survived something. Doesn't matter what it is, big trauma, little trauma, stress, depression, whatever. Green hearts in the chat if you're a survivor. Coach Shishi, Melody, I see you. Brooks, we got some survivors in the house. I'm a survivor too, y'all. Hey girls, hey. Tasha Lee, Z. All right, so we got some survivors. YouTube, Facebook, we don't got no survivors up there. Y'all ain't gotta be the strong one. We in this together. Because, you know, I think that a lot of people think that survival mode is temporary. Like, it's just something that you enter during a crisis, right? Some people have been surviving for so long that they genuinely don't remember who they are outside of pressure. Monique said, I'm a survivor. Yeah. And, you know, that's not something that I think we talk about enough. Because, see, survival mode is useful when danger is present, right? It helps you push through emergencies, protect yourself, handle instability, right? To get through loss, to keep moving when life gets heavy. Tasha said, I'm tired of being the strong one. That chapter is over. I know that's right. Oh, Helen is gone, right? And so again, survival mode is useful when danger is present. Because that's what keeps us moving when life gets heavy. But the problem is when survival mode becomes your default setting, right? Because eventually your body stops knowing the difference between danger and peace. And see, that changes everything. Because now your nervous system stays activated when nothing bad is currently happening. You still feel restless, still feel anxious, still feel emotionally guarded, still feel like you can't fully exhale, right? And honestly, some people are so used to dysfunction that calm feels uncomfortable. That's real, right? You finally get healthy love, but it feels boring. Rest feels lazy. Stillness feels unsafe. And peace honestly feels suspicious because survival mode trains you to stay alert, to anticipate disappointment, to prepare for chaos, to keep one eye open emotionally. And living like that for years will absolutely disconnect you from your joy because your body cannot fully receive pleasure while you're constantly preparing for pain. That's why some people ruin good moments without even realizing it. You finally feel the blessing and immediately you start worrying about losing it. You finally experience peace and you start waiting for something bad to happen. You finally get rest and then you feel guilty for slowing down. See, that's a survival brain. And survival brain will convince you that your worth is tied to struggle. That if you're not exhausted, overwhelmed, sacrificing or constantly needing, you're somehow not doing enough. And see, that mindset right there, it steals people's lives quietly. Because now you're no longer experiencing life, you're managing it. Everything becomes task oriented. Wake up, handle responsibilities, respond to problems, get through the day, repeat. Wake up, handle responsibilities, respond to problems, get through the day, repeat. No presence, no softness, no emotional contact, or no emotional connection, right? Just maintenance. Wake up, handle responsibilities, respond to problems, make it through the day, repeat. And honestly, that's why some people feel emotionally numb even during good seasons, because their bodies have never learned how to come out of survival mode long enough to receive the good. And think about how heartbreaking that is. You know, some people prayed for peace, then became too emotionally exhausted to enjoy it once it arrived. Some people survived moments or environments that required them to suppress their feelings just to make it through. And now years later, they still don't know how safety feels. Right? They still don't know how to safely feel. And that's why emotional numbness is deeper than just think positive. Right? This is nervous system work. This is emotional safety work. This is healing work. Because if your body has spent years bracing for impact, of course another softness feels unfamiliar. And, you know, let's go ahead and talk about the emotional cost to always being on. And when I say always being on, I'm talking about always available, always dependable, always caring, always fixing, always anticipating everybody else's needs. That hypervigilance drains people, especially women, especially caregivers, especially people who were forced to mature early. Some people were never taught how to rest emotionally. They only learned how to recover enough to keep functioning. And see, there's a difference. Recovery says, let me recharge so I can keep producing. Healing says, let me reconnect with myself because I matter beyond what I provide. See the difference? Let me recharge so I can keep producing. Let me reconnect with myself because I matter beyond what I provide. Which one do y'all want? Because see, that distinction changed my life personally. Because again, there was that season where I realized that I wasn't actually resting. I was just temporarily collapsing between responsibilities. That's not peace. That's exhaustion with a time limit. Real healing required me to stop glorifying survival, because survival had become a part of my identity. People praised how much that I could carry, how much that I could endure, how resilient that I was. But internally, I was emotionally starving. And I think that a lot of people listening can relate to that, right? Welcome in, Chef. I think that a lot of people can relate to that. Elevated Awakenings, Butterfly. You know, especially if you've spent your life being that strong one. You get so used to carrying everything that you stop noticing how heavy it actually is until one day, nothing feels good anymore. That's why survival mode robs people quietly. Not always through dramatic breakdowns. Sometimes through emotional, disconnection, like numbness, fatigue, flatness, lack of joy, lack of presence. You're alive technically, but you're no longer fully experiencing your life. And I want you guys to know that you deserve more than just existing in this constant emotional survival. You deserve to feel safe enough to actually live too. That sentence, I don't recognize myself lately, that's not a small statement. That sentence carries grief, because sometimes the hardest loss to process is not losing another person, it's losing the connection with yourself. And I think that people underestimate how painful that is, especially when you remember pieces of who you used to be. The version of you that used to feel lighter, more playful, more hopeful, more emotionally available, more connected to life. And then one day you wake up and you realize that you barely laugh anymore. You barely rest. You barely feel excited. You barely feel present. And the scary part in all of this is that sometimes it happens so gradually that you don't even notice yourself disappearing in real time. You just slowly become consumed by survival, consumed by responsibilities, consumed by stress, by heartbreak, by caregiving, by trauma, consumed by everybody needing something from you, until eventually there's barely anything left for you. And that realization can break your heart quietly, because now you're grieving a version of yourself that still technically exists, but feels emotionally far away. Because the people around you may still see the functional version of you, the working you, the parenting you, the grandparenting you, the productive you, the dependable you, right? But they don't see how disconnected you feel internally. And honestly, a lot of people become experts at hiding it, especially people who are used to being needed. You learn how to perform normalcy. You learn how to smile on cue. You learn how to show up while mentally exhausted. You learn how to make people comfortable while quietly unraveling on the inside. And that performance is exhausting, because eventually you realize, I don't even know who I am when I'm not surviving something. And that right there, that's deep. Some people have spent so much time managing crises that peace literally feels unfamiliar to their identity. And when you finally slow down long enough to look at yourself honestly, you realize how disconnected you've become. Disconnected from your body, disconnected from your emotions, your creativity, your needs, your joy. Emotional numbness impacts your identity, because when people stop feeling emotionally alive, they often stop engaging with themselves altogether. You stop dressing like yourself. You stop taking pictures. You stop creating. You stop dreaming publicly. You stop speaking up. You stop trying new things. Stop investing emotionally in your own life. Not because you're lazy, right? You're not lazy. Not because you're incapable. What's up, Kojo? Welcome in. It's because internally you feel emotionally depleted. And people who are depleted often stop believing that they deserve softness. So now life becomes obligation instead of experience. You wake up already tired, move through the day emotionally detached, Go to bed overstimulated but emotionally empty. Then you repeat the same cycle again tomorrow. And that kind of living will slowly convince people that they're losing themselves, especially when they compare themselves to who they used to be. I used to be so motivated. I used to be fun. I used to love creating. Go ahead, y'all. Tell me who you used to be. I used to enjoy people. I used to feel closer to God. I used to have dreams. Right? Who did y'all used to be? I used to feel so much enthusiasm just for a new day, right? That motivation. See, that grief is real. But I also need us to stop romanticizing functioning while emotionally disconnected. Brooke said I used to laugh more. I used to be funny. I mean, I still think I'm kind of funny. But I think I used to be funnier. But again, guys, I need for us to stop romanticizing functioning while, emotionally disconnected. Because too many people are praised for surviving while privately suffering. Right? We live in a society where people celebrate the hustle, celebrate the resilience, celebrate the sacrifice. But nobody asks what it costs. Right? Nobody cares about that price tag. At what cost, at what emotional cost did you become this strong? At what emotional cost did you become this dependable? At what emotional cost did you become the person that everybody can count on? Because sometimes strength was developed through chronic self-abandonment. And eventually your soul starts demanding a reconnection. That's why emotional numbness can be a turning point. Painful, yes. Confusing, absolutely. But sometimes numbness is the alarm system. The signal saying the way you've been living is no longer sustainable. And honestly, that realization is what birthed so much of the Room to Breathe vision for me personally. Because there came a point where I realized I cannot build a life where everybody experiences me except me. I cannot keep being emotionally available to the world while disconnected from myself. I cannot keep pouring healing into others while privately neglecting my own humanity. That awareness changed everything for me. Because healing started when I stopped saying, how do I get back to being productive? And started when I said, how do I reconnect with myself again? See, that question right there, that's where real healing begins. And I tell you guys all the time, you can't heal what you keep performing through. And listen, this part of the conversation may get a little uncomfortable, but we gon' get through it. Because again, we live in a world that rewards performance more than honesty. As long as you keep producing, keep smiling, keep posting, keep everybody else happy, people assume that you're okay. And if we're honest, a lot of us have become masters of performing wellness. We sound healed. We know how to look functional. We know how to say the right things, and we know how to motivate other people while privately struggling to motivate ourselves. And that performance gets exhausting after a while, especially when you're the person that everybody expects wisdom from. The strong friend, the coach, the caregiver, the parent, the grandparent, the leader, the encourager, right? People become so used to receiving strength from you that you forget that you require care too. And sometimes you forget too. Because somewhere along the way, your value became attached to what you can provide for others. So now resting feels selfish. Slowing down feels irresponsible. Needing help feels uncomfortable. And emotional numbness starts creeping in because your inner self has been neglected for too long. That's why I need for people to understand that you cannot endlessly abandon yourself and still expect to feel emotionally connected to your life. Eventually, your spirit will start protesting. That unexplained exhaustion, that irritability, that emotional flatness, or that constant feeling of being disconnected from joy, sometimes that's not laziness. That's accumulated emotional neglect. I think that a lot of high functioning people don't realize how deeply they've neglected themselves emotionally because they've normalized survival. You become so focused on being needed that you stop asking yourself, what do I need? Honestly, some people are terrified to ask themselves that question. Because what if the answer is, I'm tired, I'm hurt, I'm lonely, I'm burnt out, I'm emotionally overwhelmed, I don't know who I am anymore. See, that level of honesty can crack open years, and I mean years, of suppressed emotion. That's why some people stay busy. They stay distracted. They stay productive. Because productivity can become emotional avoidance dressed up as ambition. But let's tell the truth. Some people are not okay. They're just highly efficient at disassociating. Still handling business. Still getting things done. Still functioning externally. Meanwhile, internally, they feel emotionally disconnected from themselves. And family, your body will always keep score. You can override your emotions for a season. You can suppress your needs temporarily. You can ignore burnout for a while, but eventually your body will keep score and things will start breaking down. I'm talking about your energy, your focus, your motivation, your emotional capacity, your patience, your ability to feel joy. And see, that's why healing requires honesty. And I'm talking about real honesty, not inspirational quote honesty, not I'm just tired honesty, not I'll be okay honesty. I'm talking about the kind of honesty that says, no, I have not been okay for a while. I've been surviving emotionally. I've been disconnected from myself. I've been pouring from an empty place. I've been performing strength because I don't know what else to do. And I'm going to say something that I hope frees somebody. Admitting that you're struggling does not make you weak. Admitting that you are struggling does not make you weak. It makes you aware. And awareness is where healing begins. Because you cannot heal a version of yourself that you refuse to acknowledge exists. That's why emotional numbness can become dangerous when people keep minimizing it. You tell yourself it's not that bad. I'll snap out of it. I just need a break. I just need to push through it. I need to push a little harder. Meanwhile, your spirit is literally begging for care. Not productivity. Not pressure. Not another responsibility. Care. Real care. The kind that asks what hurts. What's draining me? What am I avoiding emotionally? What parts of myself have I been abandoning trying to survive? And see, family, those questions matter. Because some people are carrying grief that they've never processed, trauma that they've minimized, heartbreak that they rushed through, burnout that they have ignored, pressure that they've normalized. Then they wonder why they can't feel joy anymore. Baby, you can't continuously override your humanity and still expect emotional wholeness. Healing requires space and stillness and support and boundaries and rest, safety, community, right? Honesty. Welcome in, Tiffany Music. Hey, Lolo. And honestly, one of the biggest lies that survival mode has taught us is that as long as I'm functioning, I'm fine. No, that ain't it. Functioning and healing are not the same thing, because you can be productive and emotionally depleted at the exact same time. You can be successful and silently suffering at the exact same time. You can be surrounded by people and still feel emotionally disconnected from yourself. That's why I had to personally learn that healing was not about me becoming more productive. That healing was about me being present again, present with myself, with my emotions, my needs, my humanity. Because listen, I spent too long performing strength while privately feeling emotionally exhausted. And eventually I realized that I didn't need another productivity strategy. I needed permission to finally be human again. And so after everything that we've talked about today, I think that this part right here is the most important, right? Relearning pleasure after pain. Because when people hear conversations about emotional numbness and burnout, right? And Anhedonia, right? Anhedonia, sometimes they immediately feel hopeless, right? I know you sitting out there just feeling hopeless, like, okay, but how do I get back to myself? And honestly, that question alone is part of your healing, right? That how do I get back to myself? Because that means somewhere inside of you, there is still the desire to reconnect. Still a desire to feel. Still a desire to experience life beyond survival. And that matters more than you know. But I want to say this first. Relearning joy after emotional exhaustion is not always dramatic. Sometimes healing is painfully small at first. And I mean small, right? Like some days healing looks like just finally opening the curtains, drinking water, taking a shower without rushing, listening to one song all the way through, going outside for 5 minutes, laughing once genuinely, crying honestly after months of emotional suppression. And people underestimate how healing those moments can be. Because when you've spent so long, such a long time emotionally disconnected, your nervous system doesn't instantly trust pleasure again. Twista, welcome in. And that's real, especially after trauma, especially after chronic stress, especially after heartbreak, especially after years of hyper independence and survival mode. Your body gets conditioned to expect pressure. So now softness feels unfamiliar, right? And honestly, some people sabotage peace because chaos became emotionally familiar to them. You finally get a moment to breathe and immediately you feel uncomfortable. You finally sit still and your mind starts racing. You finally rest and guilt shows up. See, that's what happens when survival becomes your baseline. Your nervous system literally has to relearn safety. And family, that process takes compassion, not shame. Because a lot of people beat themselves up for not bouncing back faster. But healing is not a performance. Thank you for the heart, me. Healing is a relationship, right? Healing is a relationship with yourself, with your body, with your emotions, with your humanity, right? And relationships require patience. That's why I think that self-care, gets misunderstood sometimes. because people reduce self-care to aesthetics. You hear self-care and immediately you're like candles, face masks, luxury vacations, spa days. And yes, I promise you, those things are beautiful. They are nice, right? But real self-care, sometimes it's much deeper than comfort. Sometimes self-care finally looks like saying no, finally resting, finally grieving, finally asking for help, finally going to therapy, finally admitting that you're emotionally overwhelmed, finally releasing the pressure to always be the strong one. That's real care, right? Because emotional numbness doesn't heal through performance. It heals through reconnection. Reconnection with what makes you feel human again. And honestly, that process looks different for everybody, right? For some people, it's creativity, music, journaling, prayer, movement or physical activity, nature, community, solitude or silence, art, laughter, cooking, dancing, resting. For me personally, that season of emotional numbness forced me to reconnect with myself creatively and spiritually, right? That's where Room to Breathe music started becoming deeper for me. See, music stopped being just sound. And for me, it became a release, a reflection, a breathing room, my prayers, my healing. The self-care club wasn't born from perfection. It was born from me trying to survive myself, honestly. Trying to reconnect with a part of me that got buried underneath pressure and caregiving and expectations and emotional exhaustion. And family, that's why this community means so much to me. Because I know what it feels like to look functional externally while internally feeling disconnected from myself. I know what it feels like to miss my own joy. I know what it feels like to wonder, will I ever feel like me again? And if you're asking yourself those questions, I just want you to know that the answer is yes. But not by rushing yourself, not by performing wellness, not by pretending you're okay. Healing starts when you stop forcing yourself to snap out of it and you just start genuinely asking, what do I need to feel safe enough to reconnect with myself again? That question changed my life. And let me also say this. Sometimes healing requires grieving the version of you that survived. Because survival versions of ourselves are often built around protection, right? That hyper independence, the people pleasing, the overworking, the emotional suppression, the perfectionism, the avoidance, the constant productivity. Those patterns helped you survive once. But eventually healing asks, are those patterns still protecting me? Or are they disconnecting me from my life now? That kind of reflection is deep because some people are not only healing from trauma, they're healing from the identity they created to survive the trauma. And that process takes gentleness, not judgment. So if you're in a season right now where joy feels distant, where life feels emotionally muted, where you feel disconnected from yourself, please hear me clearly. You are not beyond healing. You are not incapable of joy. Your spirit may simply just be tired. And tired things don't always need pressure. Sometimes they need restoration, real restoration. The kind that reminds you that you deserve to experience life, not just survive it. You deserve more than just making it through the day. And I think that this is the part where I really need everybody listening to hear me. Somewhere along the way, too many people accepted survival as the highest version of life that they could expect. Not joy, not peace, not emotional connection, just survival. Just making it through. And honestly, that breaks my heart. Because there are people listening right now who have not experienced genuine rest in years. I'm not talking about just sleep. I'm talking about emotional rest. The kind where your mind isn't constantly racing. The kind where your nervous system isn't constantly preparing for impact. The kind where you're not carrying everybody else emotionally while still abandoning yourself. Some people have become so accustomed to emotional exhaustion that they don't even realize how disconnected they are anymore. They think this is just adulthood, right? This is just how life is. This is just how it is. But no, constant emotional depletion isn't the definition of living. And honestly, I think a lot of people stopped expecting joy because disappointment became more familiar. So now they're just settling for functioning. As long as I can get through the day, as long as I can keep these bills paid, as long as I can I don't completely fall apart. But each and every one of you deserve more than constantly recovering from your own life. Have an amazing day, Coach Shishi. Thank you. You deserve more than constantly recovering from your own life. You deserve more than constantly needing to bounce back, more than surviving one exhausting week just to dread the next one, more than emotional numbness disguised as strength, more than existing in a permanent state of depletion. And I know that for some people hearing that, it feels almost unrealistic because survival mode has trained you to lower your emotions or to lower your emotional expectations. You stopped asking what brings me alive and you started asking, what can I endure today? And see, that's a completely different mindset. So when people live in survival mode too long, they often lose connection with, desire altogether. Not just romantic desire, but I mean like the desire for life, the desire to create, to dream, to explore, to connect, to rest, hell, to hope. Because survival consumes so much emotional energy that eventually people stop imagining more for themselves. That's why emotional numbness can feel so spiritually heavy, right? It's not just sadness, it's disconnection from joy, from purpose, from you. So let me say this clearly because I know that somebody needs to hear this. Just because you became emotionally numb does not mean you failed at healing. Sometimes numbness is what happens when a human being has carried too much for too long without enough support or safety or restoration. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And honestly, I think we need to stop glamorizing people who are clearly exhausted, especially in communities where people are praised for self-sacrifice while privately deteriorating emotionally. People say, she's so strong. He handles everything. They never complain. Meanwhile, internally, that person may be emotionally drowning. Welcome in, Jordan. Thank you for the roses. But just because they still show up, nobody notices it. I need us to normalize checking on people beyond their productivity because your worth is not tied to your output. Your humanity matters even when you're not producing, even when you're resting, even when you're struggling, even when you don't have the energy to be everything for everybody else. Because you matter. Your worth matters. And again, your worth was established at birth. I had a season when I genuinely believed that my value was connected to how much I could carry, how much I could handle, how much I could survive, and how much I can pour into everybody else. And when, Anhedonia hit me in late 2019, it forced me to confront the painful truth that I had built an identity around endurance, not emotional wellness. Thank you for the heart, me king. And see, when it happened, that realization shook me because I realized I knew how to survive pressure, but I didn't know how to receive peace. I knew how to take care of other people, but consistently care for myself emotionally, I didn't know how to do that. I knew how to keep going, but not how to slow down without guilt. And honestly, that awareness became the foundation around this community. Not because I mastered healing overnight, but because I finally became honest enough to admit that I cannot continue to keep living disconnected from myself. And honestly, family, that saved me. Because healing started when I stopped trying to simply get back to normal. I did the work. I started building a new normal, one rooted in intentional care and boundaries and breathing room, emotional honesty, restoration, community, softness without shame. And I think that's what I want people to understand the most, right? That you deserve a life that feels emotionally connected, not perfect, not pressure-free, not painless, but connected. Connected to your joy, your body, your spirit, your creativity. Connected to moments that actually make you feel alive again. Because surviving may keep you alive physically, but eventually your soul is going to start asking for more. And when that call comes, you deserve to answer. Now, as we close out this conversation, I want to circle back to something that I shared in the opening. That season that I keep referring to in late 2019 where I didn't recognize myself. I felt emotionally disconnected. It was when joy felt distant and when I was just functioning externally but struggling internally. And if I'm honest, at that time, I couldn't fully see what God was building through that pain. All I knew was I couldn't keep surviving like that. I couldn't keep pretending that I was okay while quietly feeling numb on the inside. I couldn't keep pouring into everybody else while neglecting myself emotionally. And I couldn't keep performing strength while secretly feeling disconnected from my own life. And that's the awareness that changed everything for me. And it wasn't overnight. It didn't happen magically, right? Not in some perfect, I'm instantly healed kind of way, but slowly. Through honesty, through reflection, through boundaries, through rest, through creativity, through music, through therapy conversations and endless coaching calls, through uncomfortable healing, through learning how to reconnect with myself again, through the creation of Room to Breathe. Not from perfection, not from having, me having all the answers, and not from me trying to become this polished version of healing. It was born from me deciding, if I'm going to get through this, I cannot be the only one. So I started sharing my healing out loud. The hard parts, the messy parts, the rebuilding parts, the I don't even have it all figured out parts. And that's what started as, me trying to breathe again, became breathing room for other people too. And that humbles me deeply. Many of you know that, yesterday this community hit a double milestone. Yesterday, we hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, 10,000 followers on Spotify. And I want y'all to understand something, why like this is so important to me, because those numbers are beautiful. Yes, they are. But what means the most to me is what they represent. And it is simply proof, right? Proof that healing out loud matters. Proof that people are craving honesty. Proof that people are exhausted from performative perfection. Proof that people all over the world are silently saying, me too. I thought I was alone. I thought that nobody understood this feeling. And that's why this conversation around anhedonia matters so much, right? Because emotional numbness convinces people that they're disconnected beyond repair. But I'm standing here, well, sitting here, as living proof that, seasons change. You can go from emotionally surviving to slowly reconnecting with yourself again. No fear, no doubt. Welcome in. You can go from emotionally surviving to slowly reconnecting with yourself again. You can go from being numb to feeling purpose again. You can go from isolation to building a community. You can go from barely breathing emotionally to creating a space where other people finally feel safe enough to breathe too. That's what this entire journey has taught me. Healing is not about becoming a completely different person. Sometimes healing is simply just returning to yourself, returning to your voice, returning to your joy, returning to your softness and your creativity, to your humanity. And I'm not going to tell you that process is linear, because it's not. Some days will still feel heavy. Some days you will feel disconnected. Some days survival mode will try to pull you back in. But at least now you have awareness. Thank you for the heart, Al. And remember, awareness changes everything, because now you know that you're not lazy. You know that you're not broken. You know that you're not failing because you feel emotionally exhausted. You may simply be carrying more than your spirit was meant to hold alone. That's why every segment of this conversation matters. The high functioning pain, the emotional numbness, the loss of joy, the survival mode, the grief that the grief of not recognizing yourself, the performance of strength, the process of relearning pleasure and peace. All of it connects. Because when people spend too long surviving without support, eventually the soul starts whispering, there has to be more. And I am living proof that there is. I know that there is because I lived it. I know that there is because what once felt like emotional exhaustion became purpose for me. What once felt like numbness became music. What once felt like isolation became a community. What once felt like me silently struggling became thousands of people healing together out loud. And so if you are listening today feeling emotionally disconnected from yourself, please hear me clearly before you leave this room. This season does not have to be the end of your story. The numbness is not your identity. Thank you so much, Al. The exhaustion is not your forever. The disconnection is not proof that you'll never feel joy again. Thank you, Twista. Sometimes it's simply the signal that your soul is asking for care, for honesty and rest and healing, for reconnection. And maybe, just maybe, the version of you that's waiting on the other side of this season is softer, wiser, more intentional, more present, and finally ready to experience life instead of merely surviving it. So take a breath, family. Not the rushed survival breath, not the keep pushing breath, but a real one, because you made it this far. And that alone means that there's something inside of you fighting to reconnect with life again. So if you've been dealing with emotional numbness, if you've been feeling disconnected from yourself, or if you've just been doing more surviving than living, please don't isolate yourself anymore. This is your room to breathe. This week, I want you to do something gentle but intentional for yourself. Maybe that looks like reaching out to somebody safe, booking a therapy appointment, journaling honestly instead of pretending, listening to music that actually moves you emotionally, not just your hips, taking a walk without distractions, creating something, resting without having to earn it first, saying no to something that drains you, joining a healing-centered community like Room2Breathe that's powered on school. Or maybe it's just simply finally admitting that I've not been okay. Baby steps still count. And family, if today's conversation resonated with you, I really want to invite you, into the conversations, right? Into the room to breathe. Because I know that, one of the things that I learned in my own season of emotional numbness is that healing gets harder in isolation. You need spaces where you can be honest, spaces where you don't have to perform truth, spaces where people understand what it means to rebuild yourself emotionally and mentally and spiritually. That's exactly why the Self-Care Club and the Room2Breathe Project exists. Not for perfection or pressure or performance, but for real people healing in real time. So if you're listening and you've been quietly struggling, consider this as your reminder that you don't have to carry this season alone. If this episode spoke to you, drop those green hearts in the chat. Not for me, but for everybody else reading this who needs a reminder that they're also not alone. Sometimes healing starts with us realizing that there are other people finding their way back to themselves too. And maybe that's where your next breath begins. Now, before I head out of here, let me leave you all with a little love and light. After I done kept y'all all over, but I think this message needed to be said. So, as always, I am here to remind you to keep breathing through the highs, the lows, and every moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even if it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self-Care Club, you will always be seen, always valued, and always supported. So don't be afraid to take up space, speak your truth, and make a little room for you to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life. And I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. Again, for those of you who are not yet a part of the community, we invite you into the Room to Breathe. Our project is powered by school, so you can go directly to the school app and search Room2Breathe Project. You can click the link in my bio to gain access, or you can simply visit our website at selfcareclub.org. The link is also there for you, but by any means necessary, come into the Room to Breathe. We're healing out loud. We're doing this together in real time. So I invite you in. We welcome you. And like I said, I love each and every one of you to life, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for being here, for all of the support. Shout out to all of the subscribers and the followers and all of the amazing people who have made Room to Breathe and the Self-Care Club what it is today. I want you guys to know that it does not go unnoticed and that I absolutely, positively appreciate each and every one of you for what you do. Thank you.